The second essay in this essay genre, under this Understanding the Self Through Others, is one I've sort of titled Reinvention. And it actually follows the same kind of relationship theme. It's about the relationship between the writer and their mother. Whereas I think the previous one was a little bit more values oriented. This one is too, but it also gets into some of the concrete details of, what we see in the applicant's background and what they love to do. So let's dive into this one. Every week in the summer, under a blistering sun, my mother and I embark on a solemn pilgrimage. Huge, hulking watermelons await, threatening to topple. Each must be carefully inspected, scrutinized, and probed. There are a few criteria: even stripes, nice yellow blemishes, and of course, the obligatory knocks and hollow thunks that follow. So we don't really get much in the way of, a thesis statement, as it were, for this essay. We're not really understanding the applicant or the writer hasn't really laid out this is what this essay is going to be about. It's my time working in an engineering lab, or it's about this a sickness that someone in my family went through and how wrenching that was. It's more of a vivid description. And that's okay, right? A college essay can have space for just pure creative writing where you're setting a scene. One thing I do like too is that every week in the summer, right? And then we get this language of a solemn pilgrimage. So I kind of get the sense from this that this is a really important ritual for them. Let's keep reading. Sweet red juice stains our chins at home. In the center of the table lies a growing pile of rinds, a conjumble of green and red and white and sticky sap. In time, my mother and I shred them together. Pale strips of rind littering the table. Tomorrow's breakfast is dried watermelon rind. So they really love watermelon, and they're resourceful. That's kind of what I'm seeing. So we've got 2 ways of eating it. They're going to dry it for another meal. But still not much, I don't really know where we're going yet. Let's keep reading. This practice of reinvention is common in my home. Rice sacks are sewn into shopping bags, stitches cleanly hiding jagged ends. Brittle pine cones and mellowed garden poinsettias transform into Christmas wreaths. Cutouts from National Geographic magazines, sheltered behind glass frames, adorn our walls. Pasta sauce jars cycle through the dishwasher. So this is the first moment where I think the value that we've kind of been building up in the first 2 paragraphs is explicitly identified. And what I like is that the author calls this value reinvention, which is sort of the little title I gave to this essay. But they're giving this kind of laundry list of examples. We get rice sacks, we get brittle pine cones, we get National Geographics turned into wall art. And what I'm getting a sense of is that in combination between, this paragraph and the previous one about watermelons, this is really something that this family does. They have a tradition of working together to repurpose material and to reinvent material. It's a really nice theme. Let's go on to the next page. Out of these, it is dried watermelon rinds that will always be the closest to me. It is the art of creating something out of nothing, a tale of cotton rags becoming silk cloth. The idea that something that is so clearly worthless, so clearly trash, can be reinvented once placed into knowledgeable hands, my mother's, is astonishing. So, short paragraph here, but again, just kind of driving down that theme, right, of this sort of magical quality of reinvention, and then tying it back to the relationship that this person has with their mother, and specifically to their mother's hands. So I'm kind of getting this sense of, this is a very awe-inspired and filled essay where the writer is, reflecting on this really cool value of repurposing and tying it back to this one really important relationship. I'm going to read 2 paragraphs in a row. I want my hands to be knowledgeable, to find value where there isn't any, to be like my mother's. While my mother's ingenuity is driven by weekend breakfasts, mine is driven by extortionate engineering prices. Building torque models for research projects at the lab and developing parts for my robotics team quickly became unaffordable, with metal costing hundreds. For inspiration, I looked in the strangest of places, following my mother's philosophy. Cool. So a couple things are happening, right? We have a one-sentence paragraph. And I usually look for those when I'm evaluating an essay because a lot of the time in great college essays, a one-sentence paragraph signals this kind of key moment in the essay, right? And I think here it does. In the part before that one sentence, we get this kind of open-ended, sort of taking its time, very vivid reflection about, the resourcefulness in the family, their mother's hands, ability to turn something into something else. And then we get this statement here. I want my hands to be knowledgeable as well, just like my mother's. That, I think, is like the really personal part of this essay, where that writer is saying, this is my goal. Like I'm inspired by this practice, and it's something that I want to be able to practice as well. Then in the second paragraph, I think this theme really becomes the author's own, right? Because we're now taking it out of the realm of like picking watermelons, turning National Geographic covers into art, and we're talking about something that's within their domain, which is engineering, and how they're being creative in this situation where they don't have enough resources, really. So for inspiration, I looked in the strangest places, following my mother's philosophy. Boom. Beautiful. I like that a lot. Next paragraph. I found my answer in a Swedish study on car quality. Heftier, strain-hardened, and best of all, free, antiquated Volvo car hoods offer robust alloys. I unapologetically plundered rusty cars in the middle of sandy junkyards, the sun beating my back. Once water-cut and anodized, car hoods ultimately form dozens of flawless pieces. They have become my watermelon rinds. Okay, really, really good, right? So this student is showing us a lot of things. They're showing us that they align with this value, but we're also getting, I think, an extra look into their like unique resourcefulness. Like they know how to do the research to figure out how to find the resources that they need because, they can't afford it. They're going to junkyards. We're getting that really good, vivid, descriptive language like woven throughout. And then, of course, right, the student doesn't forget that theme, which is the watermelon rinds, right? They say, they have become my watermelon rinds. That's great. That just keeps the cohesion of the essay flowing, right? We start with watermelon rinds, we pivot to engineering, to salvaging parts, but boom, we tie it back with that little, elegant sentence at the end of that paragraph. I'm going to read 2 paragraphs in a row. The first time I went, I brought the wrong tool, so I went to the junkyard, I think. Volvo car hoods, it turns out, use flanges rather than button screws, sinking me an hour at Walmart. Volvo car hoods, it also turns out, bake fiercely under the sun, searing a scar into my wrist. I am imperfect at my mother's practice, but I relish these struggles. Her hands have scars too. Practice makes perfect, she encourages, and so I practice. My hands dismantle laptop batteries, rewire old motors, and shred watermelon rinds. They mirror her hands through the sheer act of doing. So it just gets better and better, right? Like they are autonomous at the junkyard, but oops, like they didn't bring the right tool. There are all sorts of, metaphorical and literal scars on their hands where they're trying to learn how to more perfectly salvage and turn one thing into another, right? Practice that reinvention that they mentioned earlier. I've come to understand, however, that my mother's philosophy is not just a practice of hands. It is more an act of doing. Okay, we get another nice little theme, kind of a deepening of the idea. I realize this in what seems to be the antithesis of reinvention, casual conversations. My mother discusses roast beef as an amusing metaphor for communism. I teach her how to use emojis. We do math involving baseballs pitched at light speed. Ironically, these too are watermelon rinds. Interesting. Okay. Undertaking these two requires practice. So even in areas where they don't see, this sort of watermelon rind reinvention practice occurring, they realize that it does. Everything takes practice. It is the watermelon rind's semblance of worthlessness that imparts its hefty value. Roast beef becomes a glance into my mother's past, emojis a step towards expressive communication, and baseballs a lesson on simplifying complicated problems. That is by far the most important thing I have learned from the humble watermelon, that rinds are found everywhere, be it car hoods or conversations. Practicing reinvention and mirroring my mother means mastering watermelon rinds of all forms. And read the last paragraph. My mother has demonstrated how to strip flesh from rind. She has guided my cuts. She has shown me when to dry and season. Even more, she has inadvertently taught me that it is not a practice, it is an attitude. It is an interpretation of value as immeasurable. It is a promise to open-mindedness. It is a commitment to continue searching for watermelon rinds. Thanks, Mom. Okay, so amazing essay. We get so many really cool themes developed, and we learn so much about the applicant. We get those themes that I've been talking about repurposing things, always being ingenious, searching for creative ways to, address a resource shortage, whatever that might look like, whether it's picking watermelon rinds or going to a junkyard to do an engineering project. But we also see that this writer is a very insightful person and someone who has deep social intelligence as well, right? And who sees that connecting with other people is part of this same process of growth. They bring it back over and over again to this metaphor of the watermelon rinds, and they do a good job so that we as the reading audience, right, understand that it is a metaphor. Watermelon rinds, by the end of the essay, it kind of means all of this stuff I've been talking about to us. And we read it and we're like, wow, okay, cool. That's the whole theme. So this essay does a lot of things very well, but I think one of my favorites is that it gives this really special place to this writer's mother, but is completely about the applicant, right? And it's about, yes, a practice that they have together and something their mother does, ingeniously repurposes. But it's really all about how the applicant has taken and ran with that concept and how it's sort of fed back on their life and made them the person that they are.